10. Bonjour et bienvenue à tous. My name is Mary Ellen Cannell and I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance Française de Chicago. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to an introduction to World Monuments Fund and to WMF France with our esteemed speaker today, Mathilde Augé. She is the Executive Director of World Monuments Fund France, which is part of our World Monuments in Paris series, also with Russell Kelly. But before we get started on our travel through time, I have a reminder that we are using a Zoom webinar format. This means that you only see our guest speakers. So we urge you to please use the chat line to communicate with all participants. Give it a try and tell us where you are listening from. We also ask that you use the Q&A icon, which is at the bottom of your screen, to ask questions. They will all be answered by our guest at the end of the talk. Please also note that we will be sending you a recording a few days after each talk in the series. This program is presented by the Alliance Française de Chicago and the Alliance Française Miami Metro, with communication support from World Monuments Fund, the French Heritage Society, and the Fédération des Alliances Françaises in the US. This series is made possible by the generous support of Solange and Bill Brown. Now, a few brief words about the World Monuments Fund. World Monuments Fund was founded in 1965 to restore and preserve sites of exceptional cultural heritage around the world. And since then, it's worked on more than 700 sites in 111 countries. World Monuments Fund has its headquarters in New York City with affiliates in 6 countries, including France, where it has supported 30 projects at 21 sites since 1989. And finally, a word about our good friend, Russell Kelly. Russell is the curator and moderator of the past 4 Winters Lecture Series on the Grand Château of the Loire and Île-de-France, the making of French gardens, the great churches of Paris, and the great museums of Paris. He's lived in Paris for 30 years and is the author of The Making of Paris, the story of how Paris, a fishing village, evolved into the world's most beautiful city. Yes, indeed, he knows a few things about Paris, and we are delighted to have him with us today. À vous, Russell.
Merci, Mary Ellen, and bonjour from sunny Palm Beach, Florida. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, the first in our series, Mathilde Augé. Mathilde was appointed Executive Director of World Monuments Fund France in April 2023. Before joining the World Monuments Fund, she was the Director of Cultural Programming of the French Institute Alliance Française in New York, curating programs in performing and visual arts, as well as conversations on heritage and preservation. So she is well familiar with programs such as our History and Heritage series. Before that, she worked at French publishing houses in Paris, including Gallimard and the Presse Universitaire de France. Mathilde studied at the prestigious École Normale Supérieure in Paris. She has a master's degree in art history from the Sorbonne and a master's degree in media, art, and creation from the business school HEC outside Paris. So quite an interesting combination of diplomas there, which makes her, brings special skills to her new responsibility as the executive director of the French affiliate of WMF. And as WMF's representative in France, Mathilde is responsible for overseeing its many projects in France. And in her presentation today, she will explain what World Monuments Fund does both globally and in France, and in particular, will introduce the 5 iconic sites that will be the subject of individual lectures over the next 5 weeks. À vous, Mathilde.
Bonsoir à tous. Thank you so much for this introduction, Russell. Well, as you mentioned, I'm indeed very honored to be here with you tonight. For me tonight, as you can see, it's very dark, not sunny, but snowy and rainy in Paris this winter. I'm particularly happy because indeed I used to work at the Alliance Française in New York. So I'm happy to combine both of my lives with this event and to be able to tell you a little bit about World Monuments Fund tonight. So I'm going to, well, we're working on heritage. So I'm going to show you a few pictures. It's clearly, it will make more of an impact than just my words. Here I'm starting with these beautiful pictures of Rapa Nui, Easter Island, which is one of our very first projects in the world. So World Monuments Fund, WMF, as we call it, it's faster that way, was created 60 years ago. We're celebrating this year in 2025, our 60th anniversary. So it's a busy year that's starting for us right now. In these 60 years, we worked at over 700 sites and raised over $300 million. How did we do that? What do? We work with local communities all around the world to safeguard irreplaceable cultural heritage. We are never owners of any of the sites we work on. We always have local partners. And the idea is just always, to work at this global level. We were first created around 3 main sites in our history. We were started in New York with people, traveling all around the world, going first to Rapa Nui, Easter Island, Lalibela in Ethiopia, and Venice. And these 3 main sites had a very strong impact, and that's how we were created. What are we now today? As it was mentioned in the introduction, we are now a very global organization, still relatively small. The exact number varies a little bit, but between 55 and 70 members around the world, with currently 6 affiliate offices. So headquarters in New York, an office in the UK, India, Peru, Portugal, Spain, France at the latest. But we also have offices now, an office in Cambodia, and we are opening one in Bahrain in a few months. And obviously, we are not doing all of that only with 60 people. So we estimate that there are approximately 400 people working for us around the world every year. That includes, for example, the workers that work on our site in Cambodia at Angkor Wat, which is one of our most important sites in the world. And we always have approximately over 100 workers working for us there. So, and here you have a beautiful picture of Mexico. That's, we're changing here a little bit the vibe with the picture, going from Mexico to rainy Paris, and moving to France. So World Monuments Fund in France. We have been active in France since 1985 and had created an office there in 1988. We then had to close all of our activities in France when there was a big reorganization of World Monuments Fund at the global level a few years ago, and just reopened an office last year in 2023. So this picture that you're seeing actually comes from our launch event, which was at Saint-Eustache. Saint-Eustache, if you don't know it yet, you're soon going to know all about it and be en collab on the history of Saint-Eustache. But that's for a little later. Overall, we've worked in around 36 sites in France, and we have invested over 21 million euros. So it's a big impact, but we are, as I mentioned, a private organization, a global NGO. And what do? We work on heritage, we work on build heritage, and the idea is to have a comprehensive vision of what it needs. So we work on, we try to do everything that's needed on a site. So that includes physical conservation, capacity building, advocacy. We really have very, very different projects, going from what is most obvious, what you would expect of us when you hear World Monuments Fund. If you expect something, you will most likely expect really physical conservation. And it's something that we do a lot. I was mentioning Angkor Wat. It's one of our big sites here, but it's something that we've also done, for example, in, well, actually pretty much everywhere. But in Versailles, in France, we have restored beautiful decors of a place called Bibliothèque de l'Art. So it's a lot of capacity building. It's because we also do a lot of training programs for different skills. So for example, we have a specific program on golden leaf skills in Japan. And advocacy, it's because whenever you try to protect a site, you actually also need to do some communication around it, explain why it's important and how you can do to protect it. Make sure that the local communities are very involved in this process. How do we do that? We try to have a very different approach, and we don't always do the same thing. We adapt ourselves to each and every site. I mentioned that we're never owners of our sites, so we work always in partnerships. We work with the local community. We try to bring always the highest expertise, and we have the extreme luck to be able to rely on an international network of experts all around the world that allows us to bring experts from one place to the next and be sure that we always have the highest level of expertise that we can have. We try tried and true methods, but also innovative solutions. There is a lot of things that need to be done. I'm sure all around you, you can think very quickly on a few heritage sites where we would need to do some conservation work. And actually, there are not that many of us to do it. And so that means we need to be extremely selective in the projects we undertake. Why? Because when we do a project, we are extremely involved in it. We are going to support it long-term. Anything in heritage, it always takes a lot of time. If you've done any construction work around you, you know it already. And it's always also extremely costly. So that means we need to be very selective. That's something that I personally hate doing, because that means we cannot do everything. So what criteria do we use? Well, first of all, again, we're working on built heritage, skills that are tied to built heritage. So that means that we are not working, for example, on something that's very important in France, la baguette. As you might know, it's now part of intangible heritage recognized by UNESCO. Something amazing, something I all encourage you to taste, but we're not working on that. We also do a lot of community engagement, and that's one of our main criteria. We work on sites that matter to people, that are still being used, which was important is recognized, that have a strong symbolic value, that have a strong practical value. It very much depends on the situation, but it's something that's always important. For example, we worked on the restoration of a swimming pool in the UK, of a beautiful Victorian swimming pool, or on the Yazidi mausoleum, which we did that was part of the Watch 2020. So in the past few years, you know how important this symbolic importance was. And then something we try to respond to needs. So we are only active whenever there's something that actually needs to be done. And the list of our criteria is apparently extremely simple and actually matters a lot: feasibility. We work on sites where we are actually able to do that, both from a practical point of view, a financial point of view, and just from a practical matter, it's somewhere that we can go. Here you have actually pictures of one of our sites, actually, again, in La Libera. That's a map of our current active portfolio projects. That's the current one, but as you've seen in the lineup of this series, there is a surprise site coming up, and we are announcing next week all of our new sites. So you will see a lot of new blue dots coming up on this map. But you can see there are places that we work pretty much everywhere in the world, but still there are places at the moment with fewer blue dots, for example, the United States, even though we are based in the US. Something that's also very important is that we choose our new projects around three priorities, three long-term priorities, and then an initiative called our post-disaster response. That means that whenever there is a very strong, very urgent need, we are not going to ask for the sites to follow the usual process, and we have a crisis response program that's able to respond quickly to needs, whether it's conflict or a natural disaster. So, for example, we're currently working on the rehabilitation of the Museum of Mosul in Iraq, working on that with the Smithsonian, ALIF, the foundation, and the Louvre. So we're working on rehabilitating the building while the Louvre is restoring the artworks in it. So, but apart from this crisis response program, we have three main priorities: climate adaptation, balanced tourism, and inclusive heritage. Climate adaptation, because we strongly believe that climate change is today a strong danger for heritage, but also that heritage can play a role in helping us fight the effects of climate change. So, for example, we have a very large project in India, Nepal, where we're working on historic water systems. So we're working on restoring these historic water systems and making sure they can be used again to help with the water shortage in India. At the same time, we have launched a few months ago a large climate initiative focused on historic gardens and helping them fight climate change. You're going to hear a lot about that with our project at the Potager du Roi. And the question of balanced tourism, obviously, when you work in heritage, tourism is a very impactful theme. On one side of our tourism can be a disaster for any site. And again, I'm sure you have many ideas of what it can look like and how awful it can be also from a visitor's experience. On the other side, a site that's not known at all, that never welcomes any visitors, loses a lot of potential and doesn't have as many resources as when it does. So that's something that we're working on, both on highlighting sites that deserve to be more well-known and on sites that suffer from over-tourism. We're working with site managers to help them develop better plans to welcome tourists and making sure that they both have a better visitor experience and that they're not behaving in a dangerous way for the sites. So that's something that we worked on, for example, following our last watch on the site of Teotihuacan in Mexico. Finally, the question of inclusive heritage. This idea that obviously when you again think of heritage, you're going to be thinking of the major sites. Being French, for example, I would think very quickly of Versailles. But there are sites that also deserve to be well known in other places of the world, and we're paying special attention to make sure that they're recognized at their own value. At the same time, it also means that in any of the sites we're working on, we are very attentive at highlighting all of the voices that touched a site. So that's the case, for example, in our project in Saint-Eustache, in the center of Paris, which was the church of the merchants of Les Halles, the food market, which was nearby. And that's how the church was built. And so that's a memory, that's a history that we really want to highlight in our project. It's the perfect transition to show you the map of World Monuments Fund project in France. As you can see, Most of them were in Paris, and that's why we decided to focus on these projects around Paris for today. So WMF in Paris, or projects in Paris, you can kind of separate them in three parts. Obviously, along the series, there is one missing, which is a separate project, which I'm keeping still very confidential. So religious heritage, where we worked on the Église Saint-Sulpice, and we work here mostly on the wooden works, which are gorgeous. On La Cathédrale Américaine de Paris, here we worked on conservation work on the stained glass windows. Actually, if you have never been to La Cathédrale Américaine, I do recommend going. It's a beautiful place. Église Saint-Méry in Notre-Dame de Lorette. Notre-Dame de Lorette, which is very close to our office, here in the 9th arrondissement de Paris. On my side, if you don't know how familiar with Paris you are, but the 9th is the arrondissement with Pigalle and Le Moulin Rouge, and we are located right near Le Moulin Rouge. And we've done some conservation work on the paintings mostly. But it was also a larger project on Église Saint-Méry and Notre-Dame de Lorette, where we put them on our World Monuments Watch as a way to highlight the situation of the churches in Paris, which were in a very dire state, and a lot of them needed a lot of conservation. And we wanted to highlight this situation to encourage the local organizations, and mostly the Mairie de Paris, which owns these churches. I don't know if you know that, but all churches built in France before 1905, and the law that separated church from state, are property of the cities, but managed by the church, but the owners are the cities. It's different for the cathedrals. So we wanted to highlight this need, and it's something that was actually very effective among a lot of other things. We have not done that on our own, but we did that 10 years ago, and now the city of Paris has actually accomplished a lot of conservation work in the city, in local churches. Église Saint-Eustache, we're going to discuss a little more, and Invalides, where we worked on the dome. The second theme that appears in our work in France is the 18th and 19th century beautiful decors in the Hôtel de Talleyrand, which is a property of the American Embassy, the Chancellerie d'Orléans, a magnificent project that I'm going to show you, the Bibliothèque de l'Arsenal. It's this beautiful picture that you see here on the side, and La Bibliothèque de l'Arsenal is part of la BNF, la Bibliothèque Nationale de France, which has a new building in the 13th, and it's historic buildings in the center of Paris. The Opéra Comique, I'm also going to tell you a little more about it later. And the last one is the outskirts of Paris, which is not Paris intramuros, as you would say. We worked a lot in Chantilly. Chantilly, we really have done numerous works, and I know that Mathieu Deldic, the curator of Chantilly, the curator and director of Chantilly, was in this series, and hoping that you were able to attend and had learned a lot. And Mathieu is part of our scientific committee. And in Chantilly, for example, we did all of the conservation work on the paintings of La Grande Singerie. In Versailles, we worked on one side on the Château de Versailles, the other side on the Potager du Roi, the kitchen garden of Louis XIV. The Château, we restored le Petit Théâtre de la Reine, for example, or le Belvédère in the Trianon. Potager du Roi, we'll discuss it. Abbaye Royale de Chailly, it's less well known, both among Parisians, French people, and international travelers. But it's magnificent. You have, it's a museum dedicated to Nelly Jacquemart-André. So you're probably more familiar with the Musée Jacquemart-André. Nelly was the wife of the founder of the museum. And in addition, there is, I'm going to show you right now, this gorgeous painting of Le Prix Matisse. If you can see that, the picture on the right, So that's in Chaly, in the middle, obviously, Les Invalides. This wooden work is in Saint-Sulpice. And these blue paintings, very colorful, are the 19th century paintings of Notre-Dame de Lorette after, obviously, conservation work. That's kind of a global general introduction on the World Monuments Fund in France. And now we are going to focus a little more. I do enjoy very much this contrast between the decors I just showed you and this view of Chicago. It's a very different style, and we're now moving back to a more French vibe with La Chancellerie d'Orléans, which is going to be presented to you on January 16th. So that's, well, actually that's next week, coming up very fast. You're going to be, well, first of all, it's really going to be an amazing introduction because I don't think many of you know La Chancellerie d'Orléans, and that's actually very normal. It's because it's something that has been just recently restored and is not yet completely open to the public all the time. It will be soon. Why? Because La Chancellerie d'Orléans, it's actually the name of a building that no longer exists. La Chancellerie d'Orléans was this hôtel particulier, La Chancellerie d'Orléans, located near le Palais Royal. And it had the most beautiful decors of the 18th century made by this architect, Charles de Vailly. But this building was the property of the Banque de France. And in the 1920s, the Banque de France realized that they needed a larger office, they needed larger offices, and so they wanted to build a new building, their new headquarters. So to do that, they had to destroy the building of La Chancellerie d'Orléans, but all of these 18th century decor were protected by French law. So that means that in order to be allowed to destroy the building, they had to very carefully dismantle the decors and pack them. And so they put them in big boxes. They did that at the beginning of the 30s, no, at the end of the 20s, and then you had 1929, and then the 30s, then the Second World War. So basically, these beautiful decors just stayed in boxes and everyone kind of forgot about them up until the past 25 years. And at this moment, around 2002, someone from World Monuments Fund figured that it was really a shame that no one could see these extraordinary decors and started to find a suitable place to put them in. That on itself took a very long time. And finally, they were able to find a new location at the Hôtel de Rohan. So the Hôtel de Rohan, it's in les Archives Nationales in Le Marais. So it is this beautiful neighborhood of Paris. You're really at the center of the city near Saint-Paul. So once the decision had been made, they just needed to do all of the work, which took approximately 10 years. I have a few other pictures here that will give you an idea of the magnificence of these decors. So you can see they're really extremely delicate, the most beautiful testimonies of this time. You have actually 4 rooms, and they needed to be put in these new rooms. The size was almost exactly perfect, but still not exactly. So they had to dig deeper to just have enough height to be able to install all of these metals. So François Bouquet, who is the curator at the Archives Nationales de France, which is in charge of La Chancellerie d'Orléans, is going to tell you all about these beautiful decors, as well as on the construction conservation work that took place to just be able to install them in the Hôtel de Rohan. It's an incredible story, really fascinating, and absolutely incredible that something like that was done in the past 10 years in France. You almost feel like you're in one of the period rooms of the Met. And why haven't you seen it yet? It's because, again, it's only open on Saturdays at the moment, because there is some construction work going on in the courtyard, so we have to wait until it's fully open to the public. But it was a really big project for World Monuments Fund. Took a very long time, as you heard, and we cannot wait to be able to share it with a wider audience. So that's why I'm really happy to be able to share it with you tonight. Our next site on January 23rd is still a very big secret. Why is it still so confidential? Because it's going to be part of our World Monuments Watch. So the World Monuments Watch is WMF's flagship program. It was created in 1996, and it's a biennial program based on a call for applications. So here we closed the call for applications in March 2024. We received applications from all over the world. Anyone can submit an application. We receive applications from both site managers, public organizations, private organizations, and even just members of the civil society who fall in love with one place because they walk by it every day, for example. And we study all of these applications and then make recommendations on what is feasible, what's not feasible, send all of that to an external jury, and this external jury is in charge of making the official decisions and seeing what arrives on the watch. So here you're seeing pictures of the last watch of 2022. So I mentioned our work in Teotihuacan, for example, which you can see with the balloons floating above the pyramids. In the corner on the right, you can see what we call La Maison du Peuple in Ouagadougou, a beautiful modernist building. You can see Hearst Castle at the bottom. It's the castle which, as you can see on the pictures, has partially fallen into the sea. And that became the anchor of a program we launched called Coastal Connections, where we work really on, coastal heritage. So these are very, very different sites, 25 of them to be exact. And we are going to be unveiling the 2025 watch on January 15th at 6 p.m. French time. So it's noon in New York. And you can see directly the full list if you want to just register online. Go to World Monuments Fund website, the event page, and you can just register to this webinar and discover what we do. Or if you're in Paris, we're doing a public event in Paris. You also have all of the information about that on our webpage. Anyway, it's going to be a magnificent selection of projects, a few of them that will very, very, very much surprise you, I'm sure. And I am personally very excited on all of the sites, but particularly on the project in France. Anyway, I hope that now you really want to come. But the other place that you really need to visit in Paris, or actually in Versailles, this one is much easier to go to, and you should absolutely go if you have never been. It's Le Potager du Roi. Le Potager du Roi, so it's the kitchen garden of Louis XIV, and it was built at the same time as the Château de Versailles. But these are two different organizations today, which means that when you visit the chateau, you don't go to Le Potager, there is no direct access. There used to be, though, and almost every morning, Louis XIV would visit the potager coming in from this big gate, the Golden Gate. So you're in Versailles, and on the other side of this gate, you have Le Bassin des Suisses going directly up the stairs to Le Château. So the Potager du Roi was built at the same time as the château, so you're in the 17th century, by Jean-Baptiste de la Quintigny, who was the official gardener of Louis XIV, and Jules Ardouin-Mansart did the buildings of the site. Why was it created? Well, you know, for a very basic reason. It's a kitchen garden. The idea was to just bring food to the king and the kitchens of Versailles. And Louis XIV played a major role in the development of French cuisine. And to do that, he needed, well, vegetables and fruits. And that was kind of the passion of him. So he and La Quintigny mostly on orders of the king, worked on developing new ways to make sure that the king had access to fresh fruits. So for example, it's one of the first places in Europe where you could find melons or tomatoes as well, but the king had a passion for sweet peas. And to do that, to guarantee better fruits, what he would do is shape the trees in these shapes that you can see, which we call espalier, which guarantee a better, all the fruits have better access to the sun and so can grow better. So mostly with apples, but also with pears. Here in one more World Monuments Fund, it has been very active at Le Potager du Roi. It's been a major project for us, and we've done a lot of conservation work on the fountain that you can see, the King's Gate that I mentioned, the walls. It's a very large garden, so there are lots of walls that need to be restored. And today, Le Potager du Roi plays a major role in the climate initiative, as I was referring to, where we're working on helping historic gardens fighting the effects of climate change, helping them. So we're doing a work that involves research and conservation. And Alexandra Bonnet will give the lecture. She's the director, the amazing director of l'École Normale Supérieure de Paysage. So that's the school for landscape designers, which means that the Potager du Roi, it's not only a beautiful cultural site, it's also a school and a campus. We are now moving back to Paris, coming from Versailles, and actually staying in the 9th arrondissement with l'Opéra Comique. I hope you went at some point to l'Opéra Comique. If you have never been, you should really go on your next trip to the city. L'Opéra Comique. The name itself, it's a musical genre, which is kind of between theater and opera. So it's kind of like the ancestors of the musicals, basically. And they were created at the same time as the Paris Opera and the Comédie Française. But the building itself was built at the very end of the 19th century. It's a magnificent building and with particularly a beautiful foyer. So the building by Charles Garnier and Louis Bernier. And we worked on the foyer. You have a few pictures of the foyer here. Actually, even if you've never been to Paris, I'm almost positive that you've seen sides of this foyer because it's very present in French movies. So, for example, if you've seen The Count of Monte Cristo, that just came out a few months ago, a few scenes took place here in the foyer. So you will hear all about it by Agnès Terrier, who is an artistic advisor and really knows all the history of this place. So it's going to be a magnificent place. And after that, you will absolutely want to go and attend a few shows at the Opéra Comique. After that, another place that you can go to attend concerts, because there is a magnificent organ, is the Church of Saint-Eustache. So here you're again in the center of Paris. You're in the neighborhood of Les Halles. So Les Halles, it's the food market of Paris. It used to be the food market. Now it's just a shopping mall, basically, but the neighborhood is changing a lot because that's also where you have the Fondation Pinault. And the food market in Paris, as you might know, left the city in the 70s. It was a beautiful building by Baltard, and it moved to the outskirts of Paris. It's now in Rungis. Saint-Eustache itself, so you know where it is. It's a very large church. It's higher, actually, than Notre-Dame de Paris. So there is a big competition between the two places. It's a majestic Gothic church. It's really an architectural marvel, but it was built in the 16th century. So it was already quite late for Gothic. So you have actually a mix of Gothic architecture and Renaissance elements. We've done, again, a lot of things in Saint-Eustache. When I tell you that World Monuments Fund is very active, that's what I mean. So we've restored all the conservation work on one of the chapel. On the side here, on the Saint-Joseph Chapel. And we are now working on developing an interpretation plan with Nathalie Crinière. Nathalie Crinière, who is a scenographer, who also worked recently in a project that I'm positive you've heard of, the reopening of Notre-Dame de Paris. So she was the one who also worked here. So an interpretation plan, what does it mean? Actually, it means something very simple, is that today when you enter Saint-Eustache, you have zero information on the history of the church, and it has both real masterpieces in it, like this painting by Lemoine on the side, but also a very rich history. And we want to be able to tell that history. It's, as I mentioned, it was the church built for the merchants of the food market. It's the church of the Bailey of Paris. You know, it has actually a big role in the novel by Zola. More recently, it also played and still plays an important social role in the city, in the sense that it's one of the most important soup kitchen distributing food to people every night in winter. So it has this very strong social role. It was also at the beginning of the AIDS pandemic, the first and only place that allowed funerals for people who died of AIDS, and there were also speaking groups for people sick with AIDS or their close ones. That's to recognize this role that the church played in the pandemic, that Keith Haring donated directly to Saint-Eustache a triptych called The Life of Christ. There are a few churches that have these triptychs by Keith Haring. For example, St. John the Divine in New York also has one for the same reasons. So it's one of the most beautiful churches of Paris. I'm a little biased, but I would say it might even be the most beautiful one. And Paul Persetti, who is our partner for all of our projects in this church, will be able to tell you all about it. Because unfortunately, the one who is the most knowledgeable about the church is the priest, le curé Yves Trocheris, who is in charge of this church, but he speaks German rather than English. That's why. We do all of this work thanks to the support of our generous donors. We are a private organization. We rely on fundraising to be able to do everything that we do. So I do want to thank them very quickly here. And of course, I'm available if you have any questions. And I hope that at least that made you want to come to Paris.
Thank you so much, Mathilde, for that wonderful overview of both WMF France and in particular for the 5 different iconic sites that will be the subject of individual lectures over the coming weeks, and including the wonderful teaser for the new project that will be announced on January 15th. How will WMF announce this new project? How will it be made public?
So we're having both a virtual event on January 15th at 6 p.m. French time, noon New York time. And I can't say I know that well what it means in terms of Chicago time. So I rely on all of you to just convert it. So during this virtual event, we are just going to unveil the list with a
Okay.
nice video presenting all of them. And
Oh.
you will be surprised and excited, I hope.
Okay. Well, we're very excited, and we're very excited to have Alexandre Gady give us a talk about this new project the following Thursday after the announcement. So I hope everyone who's watching today will be able to tune in then. Does WMF work with UNESCO on projects, or are any of the sites that you work on UNESCO World Heritage sites? You did mention the Angkor Wat, for example.
Yes, so we absolutely work with UNESCO, but the classification on a World Heritage site doesn't have any impact on the fact that we're going to choose a site or not. What we often do actually is even work on the sites before they obtain the classification of World Heritage sites. Indeed, when you want to be recognized as a World Heritage site, you need to make an application. And as part of this application, there is a visitor management plan. There is a site management plan, including conservation question, visitors management, all of that. So sometimes that's even part of our work. What we're going to do is also help the site managers actually building this application, hoping that the site would be recognized. So that's something, for example, that we did at our work in Ani. Ani is not as well known as it deserves to be. It's a magnificent site of Armenian heritage, but it's today on the Turkish side of the border. So you're in Turkey, and it's a site we're working on with both Armenian, Turkish communities, even American, Iranians, and French. It's a very important site in terms of political diplomacy also, and shows you what heritage can do. But anyway, we've been working on this site since the 90s, before it became classified as a World Heritage Site. And for the other part of the question, yes, we absolutely work with UNESCO, the organization. We're in almost constant communication, and we even have really some joint projects. For example, we have a joint initiative on protecting Jewish heritage, where we're working both on identifying Jewish heritage sites that need help around the globe. Some are very well known, some in the Caribbean, for example, deserve more research. So there is some research, there is some conservation work planned. It's a very big initiative that we actually announced at the opening of World Monuments Fund France, so a year ago.
Going back to the question of selecting which sites to support, you said that there was an independent panel that reviews applications. Is it a single panel that reviews all applications all around the world? Or is there a separate panel, for example, to review applications in France, which might then be submitted to the headquarters?
So there is, for example, for France, we have a scientific committee in France, which is led by Stéphane Bern, and the committee studied all of the French applications and then made recommendations for the panel.
I see. Okay.
That makes it easier on the global panel, indeed. And mostly we do believe that local experts or people who have a strong local knowledge are really able to say, if this site is actually more deserving than another, which sometimes when you're facing an area that's you don't know very well, you need to be able to have access to this expertise.
This is a term that comes up a lot in France when talking about artistic matters, scientific committees, and it confused me for a while there because I always think of science as being something different from art or architecture. So I think of it now as kind of a technical committee, of experts and so on. And it's interesting to note that your scientific committee is, as you said, led by Stéphane Bern, who's one of the most best known personalities in France, mainly because of his long standing television series about French monuments and so on. But it also includes one of our speakers, Alexandre Gady, who will be talking indeed about the secret project, which is quite exciting. And also includes Mathilde Augé, who, as you mentioned, is the current director and curator at the Musée de Condé at Chantilly and has spoken to us twice before about Chantilly, both the garden and the museum. So you've got some distinguished members on your scientific committee, to be sure.
We do. We try to have experts coming in from different fields. So we also have, for example, Louis Benesch, who is a specialist of gardens, or Cinzia Pasquali, who is working in paintings. She's a concert painting restorer. So the quickest way to describe Cinzia is usually that she's the only person allowed to touch Mona Lisa.
Oh
because
my.
she's also working for the Louvre. And she was the one who worked on the project I mentioned, La Chancellerie d'Orléans. Cinzia worked a lot on that project.
Oh, excellent. Well, indeed, you've got a great representation of all the arts there. You mentioned that there are how many projects are currently ongoing in France?
Currently ongoing in France this week, 2. We're working at Le Potager du Roi on Saint-Eustache. And so there will be more next week.
Okay, very exciting. Now, would you explain, because we talked a little about UNESCO and all that, but within France, it's extremely complicated the way that heritage is handled. And I don't know if you perhaps could give us a little idea of who your interlocutors are on certain projects. There's at the state level, the Ministry of Culture, regional level, departmental level, municipal level. I mean, you have to deal with all of these different levels on these projects. What are the politics?
It very much depends on the projects we do, and also on a basic level on which person, which organization is the actual owner of the site. So in the case of a church in Paris, for example, it's owned by the city of Paris. So we work on Saint-Eustache with the city of Paris and and also with the church, because they are the one who use it and manage it. They're what we call in French, l'affectataire. So that's the case. For the kitchen garden, for le potager du roi, le potager du roi, so it's the campus of a school, l'École Nationale Supérieure du Paysage, which, because it's a school for landscape designers, is technically depends from the Ministry of Agriculture. So this, for example, is the partner that we're not the most in touch with usually, because we are not that involved in agricultural questions, except for this one. But so here, our partner will both be l'ENSP, l'École Nationale Supérieure du Paysage, but also could be the Ministry of Agriculture, and then obviously all of the actors involved. So it's close to Le Château de Versailles. It used to be part of Le Château de Versailles. So we also speak with Le Château de Versailles, of course. So indeed, it's a complex landscape.
I can imagine. Now, you also mentioned that you intervene in emergency situations rather quickly. And one emergency that occurred 5.5 years ago was Notre Dame going up in flames. And did World Monuments Fund, what role have you all played in the restoration of Notre Dame?
So here we actually had a different reaction, where we figured that what was most needed after Notre Dame was not at this point additional support directly to the restoration of Notre Dame, because it was happening, it was all on its way, and thankfully it was also absolutely amazing to see that people all around the world gathered very quickly to help Notre Dame. So what was useful. And we figured the best way to help was to actually kind of disseminate the lessons learned at Notre Dame and help additional churches, additional cultural sites, help any other cultural organization prevent similar fires from taking place. So we've done a lot of research and communication. We organized symposiums with firefighters and cultural organizations to see what plans could be put in place. Something that was actually not often the case. Before Notre Dame, people didn't really, believe it could even happen. And so they didn't necessarily have very structured plans in place to see, oh, if it actually happens, what do we do? So part of it are very simple questions. It's how can you tell a firefighter that in a building, this artwork is the one that's the most important to save? You want it to be very easily identified. It's a moment of crisis. It's a moment of emergency. It needs to go fast. You also don't want it to be that easily identified that there are safety issues and potential robberies, and you don't want to tell any potential criminals that this is actually the artwork you need to steal. That's what has the most value. So you need to find the balance in all of that. You obviously need to have effective systems in place already to just know what to do, know where to find the keys, and know how to actually, if the worst happens, know how to extinguish the fire.
That sounds like a huge help for
Yeah.
all the other churches that are out there. And you're right, Notre Dame was extremely fortunate with a very generous outpouring of donations, particularly from France, but as also from, I think, 160 countries around the world, 130 countries around the world. Staggering.
And Americans were particularly generous. So
Indeed.
something also that can be noted.
Yes, thank you. So, how can we support the World Monuments Fund as American citizens or people who are in France?
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, we're very happy that people would be interested in supporting our action if you want to safeguard irreplaceable heritage. There are not that many organizations would do it. You can support WMF in many ways. You can speak about our sites. You can visit our sites. You can make direct donations to our projects or to the organization. You get fiscal benefits. If you do that, you can do it very easily online on the World Monuments Fund website, and you can do the same if you want fiscal benefits in France as well. But already just hearing more about our sites and visiting them and speaking about them is, I think, probably the best way to support us. And clearly, I hope I'm teasing you enough because I'm very excited for that, but you need to tune in to our announcement next week. Or, just check the press 2 hours later when it's published as well. That's also doable.
Well, we will certainly promote or announce the lucky new project winner as soon as we can on our websites, and to anybody who's signed up for this lecture series, which thank you again, particularly Mathilde, for helping put together the series and selecting such an interesting array of very different but all fascinating projects that you're working on. So I think we're going to have to wrap it up now. So thank you again, Mathilde, for your excellent presentation. We can't wait to hear what the new project is. And thank you to our partners and sponsors, Solange and Bill Brown, for their support. Thanks to everyone for tuning in today, and we hope to see you next week, same time, same place, when Francois Bouquet will tell us the fascinating story about 2 of Paris's most remarkable hôtels particuliers, the Hôtel de la Chancellerie d'Orléans and the Hôtel de Rouen. So with that in mind, merci et au revoir.
Merci beaucoup. Have a good night.